Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This is the 29th part of What If Deku Had a Robot Wolf. I hope you enjoy. Link to the original story and author in the description. Chapter 29, Intermission Continued. Well, looks like the first years are handling themselves well, the pro hero Kamui Woods remarked, looking up at a large screen on the outside wall of the stadium. With him were the pro heroes Death Arms and MT Lady. Due to the attack on the USJ, several pro heroes had been requested to help run security for the sports festival, and they were among those selected. Shame we couldn't sit in the stands with the other pro heroes, MT Lady said, holding a box of takoyaki. It'll be easier to watch the students in action. We can always watch a recording of the event later, Death Arms said, having a quick smoke. Besides, we still have the second and third years to watch as well. Some of them may have already survived a villain attack, but they're still inexperienced compared to the second and third years. Yeah, but that's where internships come in, Kamui Woods said. Besides, after what happened at the USJ, there's going to be a lot of attention on the first years, including unwanted attention. They're going to need all the help they can get. It's such a shame that so few of them can actually use the sports festival to shine, MT Lady said. Only those who get to the third round can really get noticed. That's the idea, Death Arms said. It simulates what they should expect in the real world. Popularity plays a major part in our careers. The only way to get on top and get noticed is by stepping on the hands of our fellow heroes. You can't just sit back and relax. You have to actively work to do your best to be on top, even if it feels like those on top are undeserving of the position. So, you think All Might is undeserving of being the number one hero? Kamui Woods asked, a smug smile hidden behind his wooden mask. Death Arms spluttered and spat out his cigarette. What? No, I didn't mean it like that, he said before he sighed deeply. Fucking walked into that one, didn't I? Yes you did, Kamui Woods said with a smirk. Death Arms shook his head. Well, it's not All Might I'm referring to. He worked his ass off to get to the top, he said before he looked up at the large screen again, which was now showing highlights of the first two rounds. I was referring to someone else. Huh? Kamui Woods said before he looked up at the screen. You're referring to Yusako, aren't you, the girl from the sludge villain incident? Death Arms nodded. If you want my opinion, she shouldn't be a hero. She basically tried to commit suicide twice that day. He said she can't be mentally stable enough for this job, not at the moment anyway. Now hold on, Death Arms, that's not something to say about a fellow hero, even if they're in training, Kamui Woods said, sounding shocked. I'm just saying, we don't need pro heroes who just rush into a problem with a death wish, Death Arms remarked. Drop it, MT Lady suddenly said coldly, her back to the two heroes. Both Death Arms and Kamui Woods turned towards her, with Death Arms looking confused. What? All I'm saying is that she shouldn't be dash. I said drop it. MT Lady shouted as she turned towards the other two heroes, an angry frown on her face. She then ate one of her takoyaki before walking off away from them, shocked looks on both of them. What's gotten her all round up? Death Arms asked. Kamui Woods just shook his head in response and walked off. As MT Lady walked away from Death Arms and Kamui Woods, she thought back to last year, back during the encounter with the sludge villain. They were supposed to be heroes, and yet, they just stood there whilst a child suffocated on dry land, and another child rushed in and did their job. Looking back on that day now, she realized that she should have just shrunk down, gotten closer to the villain, grown larger again, and used her enlarged size to pull the victim out of the sludge. Let's see a villain made of slime stop a massive fist. Bearing the Death Arms should have done what Yusako had done and thrown something at the villain's eye, and used the opening to pull the victim out. But no, he didn't do that. He just stood there and waiting for someone with a more suitable quirk to arrive. Like any of them knew that All Might was coming. She hated that she didn't know Yusako's real name, just her hero name. She never did ask, since she was more focused on comforting the poor girl after she broke down after Death Arms and Kamui Woods chewed her out for her reckless behavior. She should have been quicker in stopping those two from berating her. She remembered the look in the girl's eyes, how broken she looked. Just one bad event on a day full of them. She just wanted nothing more but to comfort her, but she had to give her to the EMAs to look her over. They failed those kids that day. They were supposed to be heroes, men and women who would rush into danger so that no one else had to. And yet, they just stood there, like bystanders. Backdraft didn't receive as much flack as everyone else did that day since he was busy putting out fires. But the others who were there took big hits to their reputation, Death Arms especially, since he should have been able to do what Yusako had done. Death Arms had never been able to take criticism well, so ever since then he's been trying to prove that he's more than capable of not repeating that mistake. But it has come at a price. He doesn't like being reminded of what happened that day, or of the young girl who broke down in front of him. He wasn't the only one who had strived to do better since that day, and the lady herself had also sought to improve herself, and she had gotten help to do it. UA had a program that helped provide already established heroes with additional training. So, she applied for that program to get the help she needed to become a better hero. It's been going well for her so far. The training UA had helped provide her had been useful in helping her mitigate collateral damage. That had been her biggest problem since her debut. Every step she made whilst in her giant form caused damage to the pavement, so finding ways to mitigate that would help her save money, which she desperately needed since she was struggling to stay out of the red. Still, it didn't help relieve the guilt she felt. Just standing around doing nothing whilst a child was in danger and another did their job for them. The lady looked up at the large screen again, watching a recap focusing on Team Yusako. I'm sorry, Yusako. I failed you once, but I promise, I won't fail you again. Meanwhile, back inside the stadium, Izumi made her way out of a girl's restroom. Durandal and Achiko waiting outside for her. I think I drank too much in between the first and second rounds, Izumi said, sounding relieved as she walked back towards the cafeteria. I did tell you not to drink too much, Durandal said as he walked beside her. Sorry, but, after I passed out I felt so dehydrated, Izumi said, but I might have drunk too much. At least we had this break, Achiko said, gives us the opportunity to rest and get something to eat. Yeah, I really need to get some Katsudon in me, Izumi said. Are they even surviving Katsudon in the cafeteria? Durandal asked. No, Izumi replied, but I spotted a stand on the way in that served Katsudon. True, it won't be as good as my mother's, but it's still Katsudon. Sometimes I wonder if you have a Katsudon addiction, Achiko remarked. Well, if I do have an addiction I don't want help treating it, Izumi said with a smile. Durandal just shook his head whilst Achiko simply giggled as the two followed Izumi outside of the stadium and towards the stand that was selling Katsudon, quickly buying herself a large portion of Katsudon. Achiko meanwhile had gotten herself some ramen and mochi. Once their food had been acquired, they headed back towards the cafeteria to eat it with her friends. Upon returning to the cafeteria she quickly spotted her friends and walked over to them. But as she approached she noticed all the girls in both 1A and 1B were gathered around one table, with only Momo, Kyoka, Suyu and Yui sitting down at it. Hey girls, what's up? Izumi asked as she walked over, only just noticing the tablet Momo had out with what looked like a cheerleader outfit on it, Yui's cheerleader outfit. Hey Izumi, Mina said with a smile as most of the girls turned towards her. We're just going over the cheerleader outfits we need to wear for the cheerleader battle. The what? Izumi asked, sounding confused. Cheerleader battle? That's not something UA does. Well, not in previous sports festivals anyway. The cheerleader battle Midnight told us about, Momo replied. You weren't here when she came around to tell us about it, but she said that both hero course classes would be required to participate in a cheerleader battle during the recreational games. I'm going to be honest, I'm not looking forward to it, Kyoka added, but Midnight said that it's mandatory, so we all have to participate in it. Mandatory? Izumi said, sounding confused. Why would they make something as sudden as that mandatory? Normally they would have had some warning ahead of time, like a week or two's warning. Does UA have everyone's cheerleader outfits ready? Momo shook her head. No, she said that I had to make them. Okay, if it wasn't suspicious before, now it was. UA would not require their students to make their own uniforms for a mandatory event. She outstretched her hand towards Durandal, who promptly passed her phone. What are you doing? Kyoka asked. Asking Midnight to come over, Izumi replied as she sent Midnight a text. I'd rather hear this from her myself. Why do you even have Midnight's contact details? Himiko asked as she leaned forwards. She then smirked. Are you trying to learn how to be playful and flirtatious like her? Izumi started to blush. What? No. I'm not, I'm just learning how to use whips from her since Durandal's MIWR has a whip. Oh, so you've got a kinky side as well, Himiko said with a smirk before Tsuyu slapped her gently on the head with her tongue. I'd say she's too cute for that, Tsuyu said blankly. Yeah, I'd have to agree with you on that one, Froggy. Lizardy remarked. She's too cute to be R-rated. I think she's more G-rated. Disney approved, Shoto said calmly before she ate a very large bundle of soba in one bite, ignoring the surprised looks from her fellow female classmates. Izumi lowered her head in embarrassment. Bury me. Please, she thought, realizing that she should have kept that last part secret. Also, she should really learn the actuarial names of the students from their sister class. Can't go about just calling them by their hero names now, can she? Okay, Himiko said with a smirk, causing Izumi to blush a deep red. When we get back to my room, I'll bury you in plushies. She has a literal mountain of plushies in her room, Mina added with a smile. Several of the 1B girls nodded. You know, Tsuyu said, a finger resting against her chin. Now that I think about it, it does sound suspicious that Midnight would ask us to participate in a mandatory event a few hours before said event without the uniforms already prepared for it. But it was Midnight who told us about it, Toru said. How could she lie about something like this? Unless it wasn't Midnight, Izumi said, knowing full well that there were a few quirks out there that could allow someone to look like someone else. Hey, don't look at me, I was here when she told us about it, Himiko said, holding her arms up in mock surrender. Getting some confused looks from the 1B students, which was to be expected since they didn't know what her quirk was. Well, you can find out when she gets here, Durandal said before he looked over towards one of the entranceways to the cafeteria and saw Midnight walk in, looking not at all happy and holding a tub of ice cream, and here she is now. The gathered students watched Midnight walk over to them, occasionally eating a spoonful of ice cream. Izumi sighed. Is she really that hung up on Gurren? She wondered, seeing no other reason for the R18 hero to be consuming that much ice cream. You better have a good reason for asking me to be here, Midnight said in a grumpy tone, a far cry from her normally playful and flirtatious personality. Just wanted to check something with you, Izumi said. Are we required to participate in a cheerleader battle? Midnight, who had been in the process of eating another spoonful of ice cream, paused as she looked at Izumi. She pulled the spoon out of her mouth and asked what? A cheerleader battle, Izumi replied. Apparently you said that the female hero course students had to prepare for a cheerleader battle between the two classes, and said that Momo had to make everyone's outfits. Of course, I wasn't here for this, so I wanted to check with you first. Midnight looked confused. Is this true? She asked, turning towards the group of girls gathered around the table. Most of them nodded. Not all of us were here when you told us about it, but yes, you did tell us that, Momo replied. How could you not remember that? Kyoka asked. Because I did not, in fact, tell you that, Midnight replied. The moment the lunch break started, I made my way to the teacher's cafeteria. I did not come to you to tell you about a sudden cheerleader battle. If there was one, which there isn't by the way, you would have been informed about it weeks in advance so you would have time to prepare. We don't just drop things like this on you out of the blue with zero prep time, she said, unless Eraserhead's your teacher. He does that a lot, unfortunately. The other girls all went pale at the realization. Someone had almost tricked them into wearing cheerleader outfits. Yes, the outfits were cute, but it would have been so embarrassing to wear them in such a publicized event. So we're not supposed to be attending a cheerleader battle? Itsuka asked. Midnight shook her head. No, you are not. Whilst UA does have a cheerleader squad, hero course students are not allowed to be a part of it. Do any of you even have cheerleader training? All the girls shook their heads. Yes, some of them had been interested in trying out cheerleading, but none of them could find the time to try it out. Then, if you didn't tell us, then who did? Momo asked. Midnight sighed before she pressed her earpiece. Horigaramu, can you look into something for me? Oh, don't worry, Horigaramu said behind her with a smile, holding onto two male UA students by the scruff of their necks, one of who looked to be wearing Hitoshi's mask. I was already looking into it. Wow, that was quick, Achiko remarked, looking surprised. Believe me, when Nizu and Horigurama work on something together they can achieve some terrifying results, Midnight said with a shiver. Even though they were heroes, those two can be terrifying at times. Whoever thought it was a good idea to allow those two to work together probably didn't consider the consequences. Seriously, if the HPSC hadn't lost a lot of its power during the Avalon War, then it's quite possible that Nizu and Horigurama would have been able to take them down as easily as they take down corrupt pro-heroes. Horigurama just smirked. We work quickly around here. Terrifying, thank you, Hitoshi said as he walked over and removed his mask for the boy who had stolen it. How did you get your hands on my persona cords? He asked as he looked the mask over, quickly noticing the switches that allowed him to change his voice were broken. And why is it broken? The two boys quickly tried to defend themselves, but soon found themselves under the effects of Hitoshi's quirk. One after the other. Hitoshi shook his head. Idiots, he said before he put his persona cords over his face. Testing, 1 2, 1 2, he said as he tested his mask and its functions, his voice sounding like Midnight's, but not changing. My mask's fucked, he said as he took the mask off. Not only is it stuck as Midnight, but the vocal unit's damaged. I can't use my quirk with this now. I recommend you ask Mei to fix that for you, Hitoshi, Izumi recommended. She's good when it comes to that. Hitoshi nodded. Yeah, I'll ask her about it later, he said with a quiet sigh. Just hope she doesn't blow it up, he said before he walked off to find the crazy inventor. Ah, sabotaging hero course support equipment, Horigurama said with a sinister smile. Looks like that's something else to add on top of impersonating a hero. I'm going to enjoy punishing these two for this. Make them wear cheerleader outfits. Nina said with a devilish smirk. Yes, she found the outfits cute, but she did not like the idea of being tricked into wearing them. Please do, Midnight said, sounding annoyed. It'll teach them a valuable lesson. Horigurama smirked before she dragged the two brainwashed students away. Midnight sighed. Well, that's that sorted out. You girls can handle yourselves here, right? The girls all nodded. Don't worry. Now that we know the cheerleader battle was just a trick, we should be fine. Midnight flashed the girls a smile, causing most of them to blush. Well then, I'll leave you to it then, she said before she walked off. So, we're not wearing cheerleader outfits? Shoto asked deadpan. No, we are not, Itsuka said, sounding relieved. Oh, Shoto said, although no one was sure if she was happy about this turn of events or not. So, what happened? A girl with long, thick blonde hair with two large horns on her head who Izumi knew by the hero Nu Raketi, asked, in English, clearly looking like she had no idea what was going on around her. Izumi sighed. The Midnight who told you that there was a cheerleader battle wasn't the real Midnight, probably a hologram of sorts. So there's no need to wear a cheerleader outfit now, she replied, in English of course. Oh, well that's annoying, Raketi said, sounding disappointed. The other girls from 1B all looked at her with surprised looks. You speak English? Lizardy asked. Izumi nodded sheepishly. I mean, yeah, I understand English. As well as some German. German? Itsuka asked, looking confused. Yes. I am very fluent in German, Izumi replied in German, having learned the language just to listen to the one All Might interview made in Germany. Do not judge her. Fuck. Lizardy cursed. Why aren't you in our class? It's difficult to communicate with Pony here due to her not understanding Japanese. Not helped that none of us knows English. Sorry, Raketi or Pony as her name probably was, said sheepishly. Japanese not good at. Ah, Izumi said, noticing the girl's very poor Japanese. Well, if you need help I can give you some pointers. I'm quite good when it comes to learning new languages. The 1B girls all looked at her with a wide mix of confused looks. Seriously, why isn't she in our class? We need someone who can understand English, Lizardy asked. I understand English, Minoru said from the table beside them. The 1A girls looked at the short boy with looks of disbelief. If you know English, then why are you struggling with it? Mina asked. Minoru looked a bit indecisive for a few moments. Well, I'm better at English than you are. I'm sorry, but remind me what you did during the USJ? Suyu asked. Minoru didn't reply, he just frowned before sitting back down, facing away from the girls. Useless pervert. Probably had something to do with that cheerleader trick, Suyu said before she turned and walked off. I need to go clear my head. Izumi shared a quick look with Achiko before the two and Durandal quickly followed the frog girl. Su, you okay? Achiko asked as they walked up beside Suyu. I'm sort of fine, Suyu replied. Sorry, I didn't mean to bring up the USJ. It's just that, I'm so angry at Minoru. Why is he still on the hero course? He didn't do anything during the USJ, apart from making perverted comments. I know I sound like a hypocrite, Ribbit, seeing that I worked with him to pass to the third round. But, he kept making comments about me and Ibara that made me feel uncomfortable. Ibara? Izumi asked. Oh, you're referring to Vine, aren't you? Suyu nodded. She was hiding inside the tent with me, Ribbit. He made comments about both of us that made us uncomfortable. I don't take comments about my body well, since, mutated and all that, Ribbit, she said, tears slowly forming around her eyes. I just don't know why someone like him is still trying to become a hero when he clearly can't, Ribbit. The moment shit hits the fan he panics, and he spends most of the time training staring at us. He's not taking this course seriously, and I don't want to be put into another situation where I have to rely on his help to survive, she said before she started to cry. Achiko quickly put her arms around the frog girl and hugged her. I know how you feel. I don't feel comfortable around him either, none of us girls do. But, you have us to help you. You're not alone, remember that. We're here for you. Suyu croaked. Thank you, Achiko. Well, if there is some good news, he made it to the third round, Durandal said, so hopefully you girls have the opportunity to punt him out of the arena and have some payback on the little perv. I know it's what I would do. I hope it's one of you two who faces him, Suyu said as she brushed tears away from her eyes. I wouldn't feel comfortable fighting him, Ribbit, no matter how much I want to kick him in the face. I want to see him face Momo, Achiko said, just so she can shoot him with a cannon. Hopefully you get your wish, Izumi said with a smile. Also Tsu. You're groping Achiko's butt. Ribbit, Suyu croaked before she removed her lower arms from around Achiko, one of which had been holding onto Achiko's rear. Apologies about that, Ribbit, but as I've said, my lower arms tend to wander, especially when I get all emotional. It's like they have a mind of their own sometimes. Achiko smiled. It's okay, Su. You didn't mean any harm by it, she said. At least Su apologizes when she accidentally gropes someone. We should probably go find somewhere to eat, Izumi said, pointing at her katsudon. I don't want this to get cold. Right, yeah, forgot about our food, Achiko said. We should probably go eat this, she said with a chuckle. Suyu nodded. Blah. I said call me Su. Sorry. Su nodded. I agree. With the next round coming up, we need to get something to eat. Izumi nodded before the four of them made their way back to the cafeteria, blissfully unaware that someone had been listening in on their conversation. Well, all but one of them anyway. As they walked off, Achiko looked back down the corridor with a scowl. Her sight directed towards a side corridor. After a few seconds, she turned back and kept walking with her friends. Well, Minoru, I hope you're happy with what you've done. Once the lunch period had finished, the stadium was once more packed full of people, with all the first years once again standing before the main stage. Well, I'm glad to see you all back, and in one piece, Midnight said with a sadistic smile. Now I know you're all hyped to get to the third round, but we have a few other things to do beforehand. Like the recreational games. She announced loudly. Everyone will be allowed to participate in these games, so for those who did not pass on to the second or third rounds, don't worry, this is your time to shine. Izumi smiled at that. It was good that the sports festival had events that would allow others to shine in some capacity. Just simple, fun events for everyone to participate in. Of course, she'll be giving them a miss here, since she would be participating in the third round and wanted to conserve her strength. But first, before we start the recreational games, let's find out who will be fighting who during the third round. Midnight said as she pointed upwards at the large screen above her. Everyone looked up at the screen as it displayed who would be fighting who during the third round, and in what order. Yusako vs. Grape Juice. Mei vs. Tentacle. Real Steel vs. Red Riot. Creati vs. Maburo Mikami. Galastram vs. King Explosion. Chiharu vs. Jack Mantis. Vine vs. Venus. Anima vs. Froppy. Izumi gulped. Yes, she was a bit miffed that Momo wouldn't be able to shoot Minoru with a cannon. But that wasn't what she was worried about. Minoru wasn't all that scary anyway. It was the match between Achiko and Katsuki that worried her. Katsuki was known to show no mercy to anyone he fought, especially against her. And now she had to watch him beat up Achiko, one of her best friends and someone she cared for deeply. She didn't want to see Achiko suffer the same kind of beatdowns Katsuki would inflict upon her. He made a habit of destroying everything she loved, and now, she feared he was going to do the same to Achiko. Well, at least Sue got her wish and wouldn't be facing Minoru. Mirai Sasaki breathed slowly as he looked around the sterile room he was in. His arms and legs were bound to a metal chair, with a similar chair seated opposite him, a single hanging light illuminating the room. He had woken up several hours ago and had long since vented any shock he had from waking up in this place, and now he was waiting for whoever brought him here to show up. He had no idea how long he had been here, or where here was, but he knew that he'd probably been here for a few days, maybe a week. He was probably drugged too since everything looked fuzzy and he struggled to concentrate on things. It did not take him long to realize that escape was impossible. Even if he wasn't drugged, he'd be unable to break free of these restraints. Whoever brought him here was no fool. The door to the room suddenly opened and a man with short brown hair, wearing a lab coat and a gas mask, walked in. "Ah, you're awake," the man said as he walked over to the other chair. Mirai wasn't sure about the man's accent, but he sounded Russian. "Sorry about the drugs, but I can't risk you being fully cognizant for this," he said as he happily sat down. "So, Mirai Sasaki, also known as Sir Night-Eye, All Might's old sidekick. How's it feel to be captured by the villains for once?" Mirai tried to speak, but all that came out was a murmur, a drunken slur even. When the hell did this man put into his system? "Well, you probably don't know who I am," the man continued. "I'm more of a behind-the-scenes kind of guy. But I'm sure you're familiar with my work. Mutator comes to mind." Now he was a fine test subject, such a powerful smoke emitter quirk he had. "Of course, I had to alter it somewhat so that he would emit mutation gas and not regular smoke, but the end result," he explained, sounding very pleased with himself. "And then there was Dr. Necro. Such an interesting individual. His zombies were strong, but with a little help from me, he created some truly monstrous creations. Such a shame he was unable to get his hands on Midnight. She would have been so useful for my research. There were a few other things as well. The Kremlin bombings, the Long Island massacre, the Dark Rain incident in Brazil, and a whole host of other things." Mirai looked at the man with a confused look. Why was he talking about those incidents? They had nothing in common, they were all carried out by separate people or groups, and there was nothing linking the incidents together. Dr. Necro reanimated dead bodies and turned them into zombies. Mutator was just some random villain who spread mutation gas throughout Tokyo, and the Kremlin bombings unleashed a toxic gas that killed everyone. Mirai's eyes widened in shock. No, he was wrong, they were connected. Despite not looking like it, they were connected by one small detail. Green veins. All the victims of those incidents either mutated, died, or turned into monsters. They all had green veins. "Ah, I see you've started figuring it out," the man said, probably smiling beneath that gas mask. "Oh yes, I backed all of those attacks. They proved to be very useful for my research. You see, I'm into bioweapons, turning living people into living weapons. Now quirks can already do that, but I want to make them stronger. Better. And more vicious," he said proudly. "And thanks to my new benefactor, my 10 years of research have produced a truly impressive weapon. Of course, I can't take all the credit. Someone else did most of the legwork for the creation of the Nomu. I simply added a little spice to the recipe." Mirai's eyes shot wide open in shock. This man was claiming to be responsible for helping to create that Nomu All Might fought. The one that, had Argonaut not intervened, would have probably succeeded in killing the symbol of peace. And he helped make that thing. "Who are you?" Mirai managed to get out, the words struggling to come out of his mouth. He needed to know who this man was. The man before him chuckled. "You can call me the therapist. That will be it for this part. I hope everyone enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like and comment if you want part 30. If you want to hear more from me, subscribe. I hope to see you all in the next one.